Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome back to the Pleasure Zone. For those of you who are long-term listeners, you might have heard me talk or have guests on talking about sexual energy before, because sexual energy is a very big topic, and that is going to be our topic tonight. But we do have a guest tonight, so we're going to have a different take on it. Almost every time I have a guest on, even if we're talking about similar topics that we've talked about before, it's wild and wacky, but everybody's got another take on it. So we're going to have that again today. Today we have Jannine on. Jannine is a confidence and sexual empowerment coach, speaker, and host of the Unapologetic with Jannine MacKinnon. It's the Unapologetic with Jannine MacKinnon podcast. She helps women feel empowered to speak up for their wants and needs, command respect, and let their authentic selves shine both inside and outside of the bedroom. As a VITA certified sex, love, and relationship coach, she uses tools like inner child healing, breathwork, sacred sexuality to create holistic, long-lasting transformation in building confidence, connecting with your body, and awakening to pleasure and softening into your feminine energy. You can find Jannine at JannineMacKinnon.com. And for those of you who are brand new to this show and you're like, whoa, what did I just tap into? This is the Pleasure Zone, where we talk about all things sex, bodies, relationships. Sometimes we go to the how do we heal the trauma so we can have pleasure. Sometimes we talk about things historical. Sometimes we talk about physiology, hormones, health, everything that can contribute to having more pleasure. That's what we talk about on this show. And today's guest, Jannine, is here to contribute to that too with her expertise in sex and intimacy and relationships, talking about sexual energy. And some of the things we'll be discussing today are what is sexual energy for those of you who haven't listened to any of the episodes before. And also, I always like to hear what the guest has to say about their interpretation of what is sexual energy. Also, what can transmuting sexual energy do for you and your lover? And how do you know if you need to transmute something that's sexual energy or from sexual energy to something else? Like, what is this conversation all about, right? And I'm really excited to find out all about what the interpretation and the information that Jannine has to share with us. Hi, Jannine.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're welcome. I'm so happy that you got to join us today. So we're talking about sexual energy because when we had a conversation a few months ago, one of the things that we kind of landed on was the fun and the play of talking about sexual energy, and felt like this could be a fun conversation because I could talk about sexual energy in a billion different ways and never be bored. So out of curiosity, I wrote a few questions down just to kind of give me some ideas of what to talk about. But first, I'd like to know what actually got you interested in becoming a sex and intimacy relationship coach. I know what got me started, but I always wonder, like, what had you want to do this?
Yeah, for me, kind of my journey started out, I was a younger high school dropout party girl, numbed all my feelings with drugs and alcohol, found validation in all the wrong places. Fast forward, got married, had 2 kids under 2 years old, and I went from rebel to more good girl, trying to do everything right, completely disconnected from who I was, felt like my body was of service to my family, but like it felt foreign to me, disconnected from my sexuality, from my husband. And when my youngest was around 2-ish or so, I stopped breastfeeding and set out to reclaim my body and figure out who this new version of me was. And so that was kind of the catalyst, doing weekly date nights with myself that started out with like baths and journaling, kind of basic things. And that led me down into the world of tantra and Taoism. And it just opened the world so much for myself. It completely transformed my relationship, how confident I am with myself, how I show up as a mom. And I just knew this is what I'm here to do, to help other women and femme beings be able to transform their lives through the portal of sexuality.
Lovely. Yeah. Sexuality is vast. It's like an umbrella, right? And sometimes people define sexuality as how we maybe identify, like, what is your sexuality? And people might go, I'm gay, I'm straight. And it's, all the LGBTQ, and then maybe you're not, maybe you're hetero. And then there's all of that is usually how people define sexuality, but sexuality is broader than that, far broader. And it includes all kinds of things, like the way we experience ourselves as a sexual being. And I think that's, it's kind of, that is more of an all-encompassing explanation, is that it has to do more with how we see ourselves as a sexual being. So our sexuality is something that also, keep in mind, can change all the time. There's a new term that's that I'm seeing around social media these days called comphet. Yeah, and it looks like confet when you look at it, because it's like COMPHET. And it's compulsory heterosexuality, where you like grow up thinking, oh, I have to be this or I have to be that. And so for a lot of women who are going through, especially women who are going through self-exploration, understanding what your needs are, what your desires are, sometimes you might find out that all this time you're thinking, well, this was the relationship, I should be doing this kind of relationship in this certain way, and that might not be the case. So we're not here to convert you guys to being gay, just saying. It's just, your sexuality is vast and you got options. So,
lots of options.
Because you can convert people to gay. No, you can't. So we are going to have a dive into sexual energy, which I think is a very, also kind of a broad term. But how do you personally, when you look at sexual energy, and somebody talks about sexual energy to you, what are some of the things that pop in your mind with that term?
So for me, sexual energy is very much that like energetic, spiritual side of things. And so how I like to break it down is sexual energy is this very potent creation energy. It's how we literally create life. It's how we create other humans, animals create other animals. Of course, there's other spin-offs for it, but in terms of sexuality, it's potent energy. And that really rises in us and builds within us with our turn on through sensuality, through all different things. And that energy builds in our body, and there's a way we can really play around with it. And on kind of one side of the spectrum, where we're not so much aware of the energy, or sometimes maybe we are, and we're just wanting a quickie. Either way, totally okay, but it's more that like quick burst. We have the orgasm and poof, it's gone. And then we can move over to the other side and really begin to play around with it. We can use our sexual energy to really nourish our body. That's one thing I found it really helpful for personally. Like as a mom, exhausted, tired, I can actually use that energy and nourish myself from the inside out. And you can run it through your chakras or through your microcosmic orbit. And then there's also ways of tapping into sex magic, sexual energy transmutation, and using that like really potent energy with manifestation to really manifest things using that creation energy.
We're definitely going to talk about that. I'm a big fan of using sexual energy for creation because that's what it's for. So using
Absolutely.
it for manifesting, actualizing creation in your life, whether it's helping your business grow, whether it's healing your body, whether it's, bringing new friendships, relationships, healing old ones. It's amazing it's a very big tsunami-like energy that can be guided, and it can actually be utilized in ways that is actually quite refined rather than messy. Because a lot of times what people are doing with their sexual energy, what I see is it gets messy. It's kind of getting splatted everywhere. Like, I think a lot of these, it's just my interesting take on it, but having access to multiple people who will just have random sex with no purpose is kind of splattering sexual energy everywhere with no defined direction. So it's like, if I describe it as a visual, it's kind of like having swamp water just chucked in the air and it lands places, rather than, say, if you refine it, your swamp water goes in the air and then it starts to be filtered, changes, it turns into mist, it turns into rain, and then it nourishes us. So we can do different things with it, right? Like, we don't have to we don't have to splatter it, but as you were talking about when you were younger, and I did the same thing too, right? I had a lot of fun, and I didn't have a lot of refinement in sexual energy, and I don't think that it's actually age related. I think for me it was more what I was healing at the time and needing to feel validated through sex. So that was a big proponent of my behavior, for sure. And then when you do see people who, even if they're teenagers or early 20s, and they're quite strong in their character, I guess you could say, about their beliefs about who they are, they tend to not splatter their sexual energy everywhere randomly. So like I was mentioning before, like a lot of the different sites, like the Tinder and Grindr, and like all these sites that are hookup sites, are really promoting basically the whole splattering of sexual energy, and it's not being refined or utilized in ways. Can you imagine if we took all the energy of all the people who are using Tinder, even like right now as we speak, and splattering their sexual energy randomly, but if we refined it for world peace,
wow,
we'd probably have it, right?
Absolutely.
So we need a new website for people who actually would like to have intentional sexual encounters that can be life-changing and world-changing. That's what we need.
Yes.
So who wants to assist with this to create the app? I'm so down with helping you. So it's I think it's a very fascinating thing. So yeah, sexual energy as the creation energy of life. I totally that's exactly how I define it too. It is the energy of creation of life. And Wilhelm Reich, who was an amazing scientist, psychologist, back in the day, he referred to sexual energy as orgon. It was like he created these different mechanisms or different ways, and even there were like units you could sit in that would help you generate sexual energy. And that sexual energy was he was actually using it for things like different psychosis to help heal the mind, and then help heal different body situations too, cancers, tuberculosis, all kinds of stuff. Of course, he was rebuked. They said that his work was insane, but to this day, people are still finding and using orgon generators and are getting results. So healing with sexual energy, even though that was sort of like induced by something external, the thing is, like, sometimes our sexual energy is induced by something external, like turn on by another person. So whether you've got that happening with like some kind of a unit, or whether you've got it happening with a person, I don't think it's irrelevant how it's happening, as long as it's being directed for something and there's a purpose behind it. So what would you say I don't think I can pinpoint mine, but who knows? Maybe after you tell a story, I'll be able to kind of like think and pinpoint one. But when do you, like, the very first time you ever experienced an awareness that you could do something with sexual energy other than have an orgasm where the energy just goes out and deflates? Like, what, what was it? Like, was it with your current partner? Like, what was going on, and what did you notice as a difference?
A couple different things come to mind with that. And I just love your visual with the swamp water and like the splattering and going through the filtering. That's a really great representation of it. But what comes to mind in like opening up my world to what's really possible with sexual energy is I was at a women networking event, and it was the first time I ever saw a woman openly speaking about sex in a like public open room. It was Angela Thurston, who is now the lead trainer for Jaya at Blueprint Inc. And she was just speaking about orgasms and giving away vibrators. And one thing she touched on was kind of what I touched on at the beginning, and how we can actually hold our orgasmic energy within us. That many people, it's poof and gone, but you can actually take a moment to really keep that within you and circulate that energy. And that was the first time I'd ever heard anything like that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that was about 10 years ago. And it's really funny because fast forward, I've now had her on my podcast. And it's really been that full circle moment. I've given away vibrators. She was the first one I saw doing that. And then in terms of my like personal experience with my husband, we had kind of different up levels in our sex life. And it seemed like through each kind of like personal relationship milestone, whether it was through like having kids together or even like a fight and mending that and coming closer together, it was like we kind of went up these different levels. And at one point during this like reclamation journey, I just remember the orgasmic energy being different than ever before. And I could feel it like shooting out of my head and shooting out of my nipples. And I'm like, holy cow, like this is amazing. And like, what's going on? And that was the first time I really felt it to that level. And it was just like, wow, like this is something different. This isn't the usual, what everyone talks about. Like, this is amazing, and I want to tap more into this.
That's awesome. So I'm sure that was quite the visual. I like the visual. So for those of you who are watching, like Jannine really gave us the visual. The energy coming out of the nipples was beautiful, like everywhere. It's just going everywhere.
It was so cool.
And it expands because your energy does expand. It's a wild and amazing thing. And I think there is a very big difference between the energy when it just fizzles and flats out and the one when you can start circulating that microcosmic orbit. We will talk a little bit about that. It is a very fun process to do. I have talked about it on the show before. Sometimes I refer to it as the inner smile as well, because you can do it for, if you've never had an orgasm, you don't have to have had an orgasm, but you can find things that have brought your body pleasure and joy, and you can circulate that too through the microcosmic orbit. So we're going to talk some fun things about sexual energy. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet. And sexual energy is an interesting thing, for sure. I've found actually in this last week alone, I had somebody, now I don't know how to word this, but very excited. Yeah, we'll word it that way. Very excited on a phone call and asked if that was appropriate or not. And I said, well, the thing is, sexual energy is always appropriate because unless you're throwing it at somebody or unless you are doing something with a violation, you keeping it to yourself keeps you alive. So, but if you're going to try and violate me, no, that's not okay. And if you're trying to do something out of my consent, that's not okay. So to be turned on in front of somebody doesn't mean that you have to masturbate in front of them. You can be on a call. I could be on a call right now with Jannine. For all you guys know, I could be highly orgasmic right now and you wouldn't even know it because my hands are here, but I could be feeling really turned on. And that's okay. You don't have to take care of business just because you're turned on. I just want to add that because there is this tendency for when people feel sexual energy. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, Jannine, but there's like this auto responder. It's like, I feel sexual energy. I must act on it. It must be physical. It must happen. And if I don't, then I will be blue balled or I will, there will be something terrible that happens to me if I don't take care of this. So what have you ever noticed anything peculiar when it comes to sexual energy or misunderstandings around sexual energy?
I find with a lot of the women I work with, it's actually kind of the opposite. And it's the shame and the guilt and the something's wrong. I need to stuff it down and hide it and like not experience this anymore because it's wrong and it's dirty and it's shameful. And so that's what I see a lot. And really being able to tap into like the sexual energy is life force energy, I find can be really freeing for those people.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like how you touched on, you don't necessarily have to act on it. And it really is how we get our liveliness and how we're able to tap into our sensuality. Like we can be turned on by just delicious, sweet fruit and just fully tasting the deliciousness of it and relishing in the moment. And like, that's amazing. That's how we're really like feeling all of our humanness and just this amazing pleasure.
Our bodies, I mean, people talk about, you've got your five senses. We actually have multiply more than that, like well over 20. But being able to experience them is part of the condition of having a body. So, and not everybody experiences every sense. Not everybody has the sense of taste or smell or sight or hearing. Absolutely. And there are ones like proprioception and interoception and how we feel things on the outside of our body and internally and how we feel our environments in different ways as more of a bigger, broader experience. And then there's, so there are so many other ways of looking at senses than the ones we learned about in grade school. So when we talk about like experiencing sensually your body, sensual is your senses. And that's all of them. And it's like, whether you're feeling your space or there's a lot of times where I find that sexual energy can be, what's the word for it? Maybe deterred. Like you could be in an environment where everything looks great, somebody's like set the mood, the lights are great, the lighting's good, the place looks nice, but all of a sudden there's a smell that doesn't quite hit your heart the right way and you're turned off. And then I find that women have a tendency to react more to things like the the proprioception rather than everything they can feel environmentally. And it's like, "Ooh, that's off. I feel it." And that could be a deal breaker right there. It's like, yeah, you know what? The energy just died. It moved, it left, it's gone. And so to not make yourself wrong for that, because it is an experience of the body, and your body will be interpreting different signals and different things. And there may be things and smells that create an awareness in you, not necessarily trigger you. You might not like lose it and want to punch somebody, but they might create an awareness in your body that flips the energy, and then it goes, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm bleh. If you were raised in a house where there was abuse and the father always smoked cigarettes, and then somebody brings in something that smells like a cigarette, you might be totally turned off. It can be that subtle. And energy is the unseen. So sometimes it is those things where it's even like the energy of a smell. Even though there's the smell of a smell, there's also the energy behind it. Like there's the energy behind words, and there's the energy of a lot of things. Like everything has energy when you think about it. So yeah, to be able to have to be able to play with it in a way that makes your body feel safe, I think is really important. So why I brought up this scenario was because sometimes sexual energy can be really conflicting and confusing, and we don't know why. And that, somebody can be turned on in your presence and you're like, oh, that person's, there might be an assumption that because somebody's turned on in your presence that they might do something to you. Just because maybe in your childhood, that's every time, somebody was, Uncle Filbert, I'm just making up a really ridiculous name so people don't get offended, but Uncle Filbert, might have been really turned on and happened to be in your presence as a child. And perhaps maybe that uncle was like a molester. And then every time you feel somebody turned on, it might equal molestation to you. So if you've always had an acute awareness of sexual energy and then you feel it, it can, like Jannine was saying, how a lot of women who come to her, they kind of like go get scared, or they're not at a place yet where they can bring it forward and really feel empowered by it. And that could be because the interpretation of energy and those subtleties, sometimes all we know, if you've had those experiences in life, sometimes all we know is that equals danger. So sexual energy can be mysterious. So when you're working with people, what are some of the things that you get them to do in order to switch, to start to switch that up so they can know and be aware of who's safe or who's not safe, or when is it safe to let the energy out?
Yes, there's a few different tools and modalities I use, but first what comes to mind is Emily Nagowski's work with brakes and accelerators. In terms of the brakes are that smell, or that one dirty sock on the floor screaming out at you, or knowing other people are in the home, or whatever those might be, and taking time to really explore your brakes and your accelerators can be really empowering. You can find a lot more understanding for what your brakes are, the reasoning behind those, and set yourself up for success, whether it's healing some of those traumas. If perhaps it's the Uncle Filbert situation, that's something you can explore and heal. Or if it's in terms of that dirty sock on the floor, to just communicate that with your partner if they're setting the tone for the evening or whatever it might be, to really make sure all those things are tidied up. And so that way you can kind of ease off the brake a bit. And then on the flip side, understanding your accelerators. You're able to know what really helps accelerate that turn on, what helps get you in the mood that much more. And so when you can both ease off the brake and turn on the accelerator, you're really setting yourself up for success. And then in terms of helping clients through, say, that shame and guilt that can really come around sexual energy, or just being able to really have that free flow with the connection with themselves, my work is a lot to do with the body and incorporating somatics from that bottom up approach. And I find a big block that people have is not feeling safe within their own bodies. Most of us are all up in our heads. We're caught up in the to-do list. We're caught up in our anxious thoughts, all of these different things spinning around, and we don't go into our bodies. We're taught we shouldn't feel things. Emotions are too much. If we're tired, we got to push through and get things done. And so all of that disconnects us from our body, as well as overriding our intuition. If we want to say no to something, but we say yes, that furthers that disconnect more and more. So I find really starting on building that relationship with ourselves, with our body, being okay to just feel things can be really big for some people. It can be really uncomfortable, even just allowing yourself 5 minutes, even 2 minutes, to just feel what's going on, and then adding on feeling an uncomfortable emotion, like that guilt, like that shame. And so going slowly, like not going too hard, because we don't want to like do more damage than there already is, but just building that relationship with ourselves. And then also creating our new programming, because we all have kind of like this built-in software from childhood in a way. Like we start out clean slate, and then we have our upbringing, we have what's going on in our family household, whatever that looks like, within our school, our friendships, media, all of these different things are kind of programming us and setting up our software. And then we get to a certain point where we can choose, oh, maybe I want to upgrade the software a little bit more. Perhaps this is a belief that I've been told to have, but like if I really take a moment, is masturbation this like shameful thing that's going to send me to hell? Like, does that actually resonate with me? Or maybe this is something I can unpack and explore. So I do a lot of that, and I like to do that with like breath work or pleasure practices. Because with pleasure practices, we have our full body open online. Both our parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system is open, tapping into that sensuality. We have all areas of the brain firing. And so we can really do some intentional programming for ourselves. Create that sense of safety, love, and belonging within. Say, I feel empowered in my turn on. I feel safe when I'm feeling turned on, different things like that. And so all of those things kind of play a role together so we can feel safe as sexual beings, so we can have fun allowing that sexual energy to really flow through us.
I love that. Pleasure practices are really fun and important. And I think that's something that we can talk a little bit more about in the next segment, how to incorporate pleasure practices that can also not just transmute energy, but sometimes wake it up. Sometimes it's asleep, right? Some people say they don't have that. I don't have any sexual energy. You have to, you're alive. It's that it's a little bit slightly dormant. It might be sleepy, and we can shake it up and wake it up. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll try and remember to talk about the microcosmic orbit too when we come back. So you're listening to, and that might be one of the tools. So we're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica Every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Before we jump back into this conversation about different pleasure practices and different ways to flip the sexual energy and transmute it, Jannine, can you let people know how they can get a hold of you? And if they want to work with you, what can they do? What do you offer? Let them know all about your great stuff.
Oh, thank you. Easiest spot is JannineMacKinnon.com. That's the one-spot shop for all of the things. If you're an Instagram person, my link's there. If you're a podcast listener, which I'm assuming you're listening to this, you can check out my podcast there. I also have a link for a free consultation. 30 minutes. If you're interested, if you feel connected, we can chat, see what's going on with you, and whether or not I'm able to help or show you in the right direction for something that feels aligned for you. I offer one-on-one coaching. I have my Unapologetic Practices collection, which is full of meditations, breathwork, and pleasure practices, like it sounds like we're going to get into talking about. And so that's your library where you can go on your own pace and kind of taste different methods and start with your own healing journey before going really deep with one-on-one coaching. And I have a group program in the works as well. So stay tuned for that. You can hop onto my email list with a free honeypot meditation, which is this juicy meditation to really connect with your body and your sexual organs.
Lovely. So when, correct me if I'm wrong, Jannine, you work with women, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's probably why you don't get the same funny conversations that I get that men give me around sexual energy.
Yeah. There's
those
that flip
comments
side.
tend to come from men, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So yeah, I think so, and there's some safety for you in working primarily or only with women. So if you are looking to book with Jannine, that is a requirement. So there, we're going to start with that.
Yes, thank you.
And the honeypot, I remember that now when we were talking a couple months ago about, I love that term, the honeypot. It's such a great term. It's a sweet pot of love. Like such a great terminology, and who doesn't love that? So when we're talking about, first of all, what are some of we're talking about pleasure practices, and we're also in the first segment we talked about the microcosmic orbit. That to me is actually a pleasure practice. However, I don't know, maybe you interpret it differently. What do you think of that? Would you consider that running the microcosmic orbit would be a pleasure practice?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're working
Yeah.
with your sexual energy. I definitely consider that pleasure practice with a bit of like
Yeah.
breath work combined too, because I incorporate the breath with that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
To get it moving. Yeah,
Mhm.
makes sense. So what are some of let's go with like very beginner level. We're talking about somebody who has never done anything for a pleasure practice in their life. What are some of the things that you usually get them to like explore? Like, what are some of the questions you might ask them so they can figure out what they might want to do, so that people can have an idea that they could maybe get started now and then connect with you and dive in deeper with some bigger programs with you?
Sure. I have like 2 or 3 go-to pleasure practices and a few different questions that I like to bring up. So when it comes to connecting with your sexual energy, with your feminine energy, I encourage clients to take a look at what their belief systems currently are. So again, like I touched on, I tend to work with a lot of women that have shame and guilt and all of these different things tied to their sexuality. And so taking a look at what those current belief systems are. If you embrace your sexuality, are you a whore and a slut and you'll be shamed and cast out? Is it dirty and wrong? So kind of looking at these different things, or perhaps it's fun and playful, or it's a way for you to deeply connect with your partner, or it's just something that you get to release your stress with. Whatever it is for you, taking a look at those and then pausing and reflecting on, are these the beliefs I want to have? Where did I learn these from? What would being sexually empowered really look like and feel like for me? And so taking a moment to sit with that. And then in terms of practices, the honeypot one is a really good one. And it's visualizing this thick, juicy golden honey and putting in the ingredients you want to embody. So after going through those questions, you know what being sexually empowered is for you. So you can put in some confidence, some flirtatiousness, some sensuality, deep presence. And you mix this in the honey, and then you pour it on your body, on each of your sexual organs, infusing them with these qualities. It's really powerful, and it's a great way of beginning to connect with those parts of you. Because for women, besides having cramps, we don't really connect with our uterus for the most part, or our ovaries. So taking that time to build that connection, and again, it doesn't just come at first, it can be clunky, but it's building that relationship. And then yoni breathing is another go-to. I start with most of my clients. It's in my Unapologetic Practices collection, and it's using your breath to connect with your yoni. And again, sometimes there can be blocks. I've had clients who have had C-section scars and there's a wall like right across there. And it takes a while to work through that. But you can begin to connect with your yoni through the breath. Play around with the pace of your breath and see how that affects the sensations. And again, building that relationship with your body, with your breath, with your sexual energy. And then another great beginner one is the empowered sexual woman. I can't remember the exact name of it in my Unapologetic Practices collection, but it's pulling yourself into a 5 senses reality of what being empowered sexually is to you. Really bringing your full senses online and feeling yourself as that, seeing what's around you, tasting what you might taste. What sounds do you hear? Is it your partner whispering things in your ear? Do you feel like that salty sweat? Maybe get a bit of taste of that. And just really open yourself up to that. Again, creating safety in your body to what it feels like to be empowered sexually. So I'd say those are some kind of good nuggets for that beginner stage.
I love that. That five senses one is fun. When I first started my show, this is 10 years. Oh, you know what? It might be 10 years to date, actually, because it was like September of 10 years ago. I did an episode, and the producer at the time of my show had re-listened to it. So I did one on I called it a guided masturbation, but there wasn't a lot of masturbation involved. It was five senses, right? So it was a great title to get people to listen, and taking you through all your senses with your own body to connect with your own body. So it's like, don't be shy to lick your own self, because if you even if you're just licking your arm, just if you can't wrap your head around tasting your own juices, that's cool. Like, I get that might be too much, but can you even like lick this part of your body and see what that tastes like, right? Like, having a full body experience with yourself, and like smelling yourself, tasting yourself, looking at yourself, that can be like, what? Like, it can be a first time experience. And apparently my voice popped into the producer's head like at 2:00 in the morning. And it was one of those like ethereal experiences where was like facilitating them from a distance in the middle of the night, and they like woke up and did the whole process. I was like, that's so funny. So these things can be super potent, right? So you could be running that honeypot one, which when you were talking about that, I was like, now that would be fun, not just as a meditation, but like get that honey, infuse it, put that on your body, and have some fun with yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Have some fun with some friends. Just have a fun time. Just like do what you like. Have your husband, have your lovers, have your girlfriends over. I don't know. Have a new experience and see what happens. Make it tasty and good. So it's a whole new kind of like hen parties, like just women getting together and licking honey off of themselves. Who's doing that? Nobody. They should. Why not?
It's a new thing. Creating a trend.
We're it's gonna start right now. So we're gonna head to our next and last commercial break. Things fly by when you're talking sexual energy. So you are listening to the Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and I'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Well, it's a good times when we're having fun in the world and playing with sexual energy and talking about what is sexual energy and how can we transmute it. And Jannine MacKinnon has been sharing with us a bunch of different beginner tools, because I think honestly, if you really want to practice transmuting sexual energy, it's really good to have somebody who can facilitate you, somebody you can learn from, and you can always join in Jannine's courses. I have courses as well, but for the sake of, she's got like, it sounds like a pretty good combination of things going on. So definitely connect with her. And she has given you also some, in the last segment, some very simple things to start with, which one of them was just really getting to understand your beliefs, right? I think, and that is so important because so many of the times it's our head that's in the way of connecting with our body. So once you can get through your belief systems, you can actually begin to have a more interesting, deeper, better connection with your body. And one of the things that we had talked a little bit about was transmuting sexual energy. So we have a few minutes left, Jannine. The show actually is funny in that we end at like 5 minutes too. But one of the things that I wonder is what have you found for you personally, have you transmuted sexual energy into that you found was like the most fascinating, fun, or profound or consistent that you can do as like transmuting sexual energy into something?
A few things again come to mind. Really manifesting my relationship and family life the way it is. A fun one is this tattoo. Won it through a giveaway mere days after
Wow.
sex magic practice, which was just wild. And also manifested like a new house coming into our space a little bit too quickly. We had to pump the brakes on it. We weren't quite ready to sell, but I was just getting things rolling. So that really shows just how potent it is, and to really be intentional with what you're bringing into that space. And I have a few recordings available on my Unapologetic Practices collection for really being able to work with it through the manifestation side.
Beautiful. So I know that sometimes, you could be, for example, you could be in a relationship and maybe your partner isn't into practicing sex magic. What is your take on, if you're a practitioner, is it okay to be practicing with somebody who's not practicing?
For me, that's an integrity thing, and I personally do it on my own. And that's one thing that's great to touch on is so many of these practices, like start with yourself and then go from there. Build that connection with yourself, build that comfort in working with your sexual energy with yourself first, and then ease into partnered situations.
Yeah, I have to completely agree with that, and use it in your own ways, whether you're doing it with masturbation or not at all, and you're just circulating the energy, which we brought up that microcosmic orbit a few times, but just teasing you guys on the microcosmic orbit, we might not even talk about it. We've only got 2 minutes left, but you can circulate your energy in your body, and you can do it. There is intentional breath work that you do with it. So is that something that you have a recording for, Jannine, that people could go on and get that? So you could go through the pleasure practices and get that?
Yes, the one I have right now is going through the chakra system, and I am adding onto it with the Taoist approach with the microcosmic orbit. And so for those that don't know what that is, it's essentially kind of like your chakra system, but the Taoist approach. And there's 2 different directions, but for example, going up your back to your crown and down your front, and just running that energy through your body.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I have done it a few times on the show where I walked people through it. So I'd have to find out what episodes those were on, but you can find videos too. Mantak Chia is an amazing teacher of running the microcosmic orbit. He's like probably the most well-renowned teacher of sexual qigong and getting that energy rocking and rolling. It is a fun practice. You can do it even if, you don't ever intend to have a partner. I've had people say before, like, what's the point of doing that if I never want to have a partnership, or if I don't have a relationship now? Intimacy is all about you first, always. So, and sexual practices have to do with you and understanding your body first. So even if you are thinking you're never going to do that, you can still connect with Jannine or I and just get on a path, because it's really about you and starting to heal your own relationship to your own body and your own self. It's really key and important to do that. We have a whole 30 seconds left, Jannine, if you don't mind just reiterating how people can get a hold of you. And I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for those listening. And again, the one-stop shop to get a hold of me is JannineMacKinnon.com.
Awesome. If any of you want to connect with me, I will be making it available that you can still connect with me until December.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.